Good evening, everyone. I'm glad that you could join us for this great webinar on October the 14th. My name is Steve Hairston. I am the Assistant Director for Employer Engagement in the Furman Malone Center for Career Engagement. I'm so happy to put together this great topic on job searching for students of color, especially during this pandemic time when jobs are becoming less available. It'll be great for you all to hear from Furman alums who are well versed in this topic and have gone through this experience themselves. And so I'm glad that you're able to join us this evening. Just a few little housekeeping notes for everyone. I do have some created questions that I want to ask each of the panelists. And so I'll go through those questions initially. And then after those questions, I'll open it up for students to ask their own questions of the panelists. You'll be able to direct your question to one of the individual panelists, or if you want to just sort of direct your question to the entire panel, you definitely can do that. The place where you'll be able to ask your questions will be in the chat function of Zoom. So, please make sure that you are using that chat function. This will definitely be recorded as well, and we'll make this recording available to students after this evening's webinar. And so if you have some friends that missed it, please refer them to the Malone Center website so that they'll be able to get this great information as well. Let me introduce our panelists this evening. All of them are dear friends of Furman and of course alums. First we have Dina Estrada, class of 18. Dina is the Programs and Outreach Coordinator for Hispanic Alliance. Thank you for joining us, Dina. She lives right here in Greenville, South Carolina. Next, we have Anish Bora. Anish is the class of 2018. He is a designer for Pegasystems in Boston. Next, we have John Ferguson. John is a class of 09 and lives currently in Washington, D.C. He is the Vice President of People and Culture for Monumental Sports in DC. So thank you, John, for being with us as well. And last and definitely not least, Joey Malamag. Joey is a class of 2002 from Furman. He lives right here in Greenville, South Carolina, and he's the recruiting manager for ScanSource. So thank you all for participating in this webinar tonight. We want to talk about the job search for students of color. We all know as people of color, our particular needs and desires for jobs are maybe a little bit different than white students who are coming out of college. And so I wanted to provide a space for us to have open and honest conversations of what that process was like for each one of you, and be able to provide some wisdom and guidance to students who are getting ready to enter this career search process for the first time, or even for students who are possibly going to be interviewing for internships for the first time in their life. The type of sage advice and wisdom you can provide is going to be very appreciated by students. And so I want to start off this webinar by asking the first question to Anish. Anish, as you were going through the job search process, and as you think about it now, what do you think are some common concerns for students of color as they enter into this space of searching for jobs? What do you think are some common concerns?
Yeah, first of all, before I start, I just want to give some encouraging word. I want to tell everyone who is here that you're as capable and qualified as any other candidate, and never think that it's your fault that if you're being discriminated, it's the system's fault. And it's kind of unfortunate that we are still having to have this kind of conversation in 2020. But at the same time, I'm glad that we are having this conversation, especially at Furman. And I'd just like to thank Steve for organizing this. So yeah, getting back to the question, just to give a little more context, is my experience is more unique than I think most people in this panel, because I was also an international student, and I came from India, which is a very homogeneous country. And when I came here, I was looked at as someone who was brown, and I think that was a very different experience for me, the cultural shock in a way. So there are some concerns that are specific to being international student, like visa situation and other stuff, which is different from most people. I think it's kind of difficult to club all the concerns faced by different people of color, because our experiences differ. But I think one thing I used to struggle with myself is that I was not able to sometimes identify if I was being discriminated, if I was of color, or if I was not qualified enough. And on the other side, sometimes I thought that I was getting an opportunity because I'm a person of color, because they want to increase diversity. And that started from the get-go when I came into Furman, like as a student too. So I think it's very important to keep to believe in yourself, and like believe in that what you have done to get where you are, rather than if you're getting it for who you are. um, of course, like I am not really mentioning like obvious concerns like like racism, limited resources, network, and like other things that like a white candidate might get. But yeah, that is one of the most important thing, a concern that I still struggle with, is like, am I being discriminated, or do I not qualify, or do I qualify and I'm being tokenized? So I think that's something to keep in mind. Yeah.
Does any of the other panelists want to chime in or even further on Anisha's comments? Those are, spot on observations of concerns that students may have.
What was the initial question? Is what are some of the concerns looking
Yeah,
for?
what are common concerns that you believe students of color have as they go into the job search process initially?
I will say, I don't know if I was naive, but I didn't approach it from a less than perspective. I sort of see it as I'm coming to the table. This is what I have. There's one thing that Furman has uniquely prepared any Black, brown, non-dominant group is to navigate white spaces. Let's be clear. You finish with a degree in how to navigate white spaces. So you should leverage that to your advantage. So I'll give one story. I'll never forget freshman year. There was a fraternity, can't remember the name, but they were having like this mixer. I needed book money, so they were offering a book scholarship. So I went. Now, lo and behold, to them, I had no intentions of ever rushing or joining this organization, but I needed to go into this room and win this $250 scholarship. And so I had a little pep talk with myself, like, hey, get in this room, network, and go. I knew going into that space that I had one thing that made me stand out, the Black guy that was in the room. Great, I'll take that, because that allowed me to sort of separate myself from the pack. I did win the scholarship, and that was when I realized like I can walk into any environment cold and leverage the relationship skills that I either brought to Furman or enhanced at Furman to navigate spaces where I feel like we are always, as people of color, understanding what it's like to be the only. When you're the majority, or when you're a white student, that's new to you. But we come to Furman sort of already knowing that. And I appreciated Anish sort of saying, like, I didn't realize I was a brown person until I came to the US, I suppose. I've never had that trade-off. I was born brown. I was born a Black man. So that has always been a reality for me. So it was just interesting to hear him say, to say that lens. So I think leverage everything that makes you who you are. And I believe that Furman has uniquely prepared you to navigate white spaces. So I think you should go into any space with your head held high, because bias is everywhere. We have it, everyone has it.
Absolutely. Very good points. Very, very good points. Let me ask this second question. Or Dina, did you have something to add?
I wanted to mention one thing, and hi guys. I love the fact that the things that you guys have brought up already, and just kind of chiming off of what John said. As sometimes as minorities, or as we see others label us as minorities, we tend to overthink things, and things are fairly simple. Sometimes it's just where to go look for a job, same place everybody else does, and then just kind of adding all those tips and things that can help you elevate and just step it up, level it up. So stop overthinking. Like John said, and I know that Anish meant it as well, we're all at the same level, and the one that puts yourself down is yourself, nobody else. And if you can go into the room with that mentality that I'm at the same level as everybody else, I think that also gives you an advantage, kind of in confidence. And I'll touch a little bit on that later on.
Great advice, Dina. Absolutely great advice. Let me ask my second question. This one specifically to you, Joy. As a student of color, as a person of color, where do you think are the best places for students to go to actually search for jobs? Where should students be finding out about different careers and opportunities available to them?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think, Dina kind of hit it spot on. It's like, hey, you go into this, don't overcomplicate it. Jobs are going to be posted in the same places that you're going to find jobs at, the normal everyday job site. And I'll touch on that in a moment. But I think the bigger question is really, I thought of this when I was a student, is really, number one, when I was a student, I didn't necessarily always know what resources were available to me, first off. And I think knowing what your resources and who your resources are is essentially half of the battle. So as a college student, you essentially have, and you'll never probably have as many resources as easily and readily accessible as you do today, right? So you have things like career services, you have professors, you have academic deans of schools, essentially all at your disposal. You also have an alumni association that's waiting for you once you get done, and you can start there too. But then, when you think about the regular everyday, the day-to-day social spaces, the internet, those are available to you as well. So I think a big part of the job search in general is just knowing exactly who your resources are. The second piece of that, I think, is just researching, right? So it's not enough to just say, I want a career here, but it's, I want a career at this company, right? So evaluating employers to really see, number one, do they even honor diversity, right? Like, which companies are going to be reflective of diversity? And there are different ways that you can find that out, whether it's going to, their career website. Are they part of like a diversity's top 50 list, or Diversity Inc.'s top 50 list, or any other national list? And not to say anything, but ScanSource is consistently one of the best places to work in South Carolina. So it's just one of those accolades that you can figure out exactly, okay, so they made this list. Why did they make the list? How did they make the list? And what makes them special on that list, right? So I think there's a little bit of homework that you as a job searcher really need to kind of do if you really truly want to find companies that are going to value both diversity and inclusion, right? And as you begin to do your job search and you start going to some of these companies' websites, really identifying, number one, in their pictures, are they reflective of the community that they serve? I think that's always important, right? Or are they just randomly putting in pictures, on their websites? I think that's important. And the other piece of that is to identify if they've put their diversity philosophy and core values that they stand for on their website. I think that's important. That's a good place to start, right? I mentioned earlier too, when it comes to networking, that's building that foundation for you and creating a strong network of people that you can connect with and build relationships with. So as a college student, you're surrounded by a huge preset network for you already. So knowing who to reach out to in your career services office, are you making appointments? And are you asking the right questions to them? They know, they're the experts, so they're gonna be able to tell you exactly how you can go about your job search and give you the biggest return on investment. I think that's a big piece. If you're not familiar with your career services office now, you probably need to be, whether it's for an internship or a full-time opportunity. The other thing that I mentioned was professors. So companies like ScanSource are always looking for ways to get on campus and talk to students. I mean, I appreciate Steve for inviting me to this, you know, I'm speaking in another engagement later on this week at Furman. So, you know, we're always looking for ways to recruit talent, and going to students' classrooms are one of the best ways for us to do that. So your professors and deans know exactly what companies are out there, who they want to bring on campus to talk to their students, what they stand for, and more importantly, if they've hired from your school. So, you know, we try to hire as many Furman students as we can, because if we did it, then there wouldn't be as high of an ROI for you know, Steve to keep bringing me back on campus, or another professor to keep bringing us back on campus. So again, making those relationships with your professors, if you can, your academic deans, like, that's a great way to, again, reinforce your overall network. The other networking piece that I mentioned was your alumni. Not just alumni, but maybe other professionals of color too that went to your school. I mean, the five of us here are great examples of that. And, you know, Furman Alumni Association is a great way for you to be able to connect with other alum and find out what companies they work for. And if they're a person of color and you know who they are, then find out ways to be able to connect with them and find out more about where they work and what their companies stand for. And I think that's another aspect too about, you know, when you're speaking to people you may not necessarily know, or connecting with people that you don't necessarily know, but really researching that piece of, you know, does the company you stand for, or the company that you work for, what do they have to say about culture? Are they proud to speak about the culture of their organization and the efforts that they have around diversity and inclusion? Because if they kind of tend to shy away, then maybe that's not as inclusive of an organization as you maybe initially thought. So it's the research, it's the fact finding behind that goes into the job search as well. And then the last piece that I think I mentioned was all about like the social spaces and the internet, right? So I think when you do a job search, it's easy to just go on Google, Indeed, any of the job boards, and just type in HR careers, right? And it just pulls up a plethora of jobs. I think a good way to kind of go from here to here is to really be intentional about your search. So LinkedIn is a great professional platform for you to be able to connect with anybody, right? Your profile picture is up there. You can talk to anybody, connect to anybody. You know, when you think about things like Facebook and trying to make a friend connection with somebody that you don't know, that's weird, right? But on LinkedIn, that's just kind of the standard and the norm. I do it every day as a recruiter. The other piece is to be intentional about some of the job boards that you go to. Diversity.com is a huge job board that you can go to, but then there's also population-specific resources like the Black Career Network or the National Association of Asian American Professionals, or urbanleague.com that focuses on diversity and inclusion efforts. So I think there's different ways to utilize the internet to your and social spaces to your advantage, but you have to be intentional about it. And I think that's a big part of the job search as well.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right, Joey. Lots of great tips of information on where students can search for jobs. You know, one of the things you mentioned is, you know, my office, the Malone Center, as a resource. You know, and quite frankly, I've been at Furman for 3 years, and I don't see a lot of students, you know, Black or brown, who represent different, you know, historically underrepresented student populations coming to utilize us. And, I just want you all to know, as a Black man who has gone to a liberal arts institution myself, very similar to Furman, our office is a very safe place for you to come and share with us your ideas, your dreams, your hopes, your goals, where you would like to work, and we will definitely help you identify places where you can apply, reach out to for different job opportunities. So Joey, thank you for mentioning, our office specifically and all of the other resources that Furman has available to its students. Any other sort of pieces of information?
There's one link I'm going to put in the chat, but jobwell.com was a group that my organization had partnered with for identifying diverse talent. So I would encourage you all to check them out. They have a lot of resources. I think sometimes you go to the sort of diverse talent resources. They have a lot of things that help you enhance and build your skill set. So I would definitely echo everything that Joey said and just add Jobwell. They are making a lot of great strides. It's sort of a tech startup a couple of years ago. So I would definitely encourage you all to check it out.
So two things that I wanted to add is that there are some other communities like Slack communities and Discord communities for professionals nowadays, especially since the world is very virtual right now. So you can look for very specific, like for me, creative industry, there are a lot of like Slack groups for like Latinx folks or like Black folks. So that is coming up, and there are people from other communities helping those people, uplift those people, and posting jobs so they can make their company more diverse, and or like doing surveys so that they can make their company better. So that's one way that you can look for a job. You can learn more about the industry, connect with more folks. Another thing is that Malone Center is definitely a great resource. I just wanted to attach to that. In my senior year, since I was international, I was really trying to navigate how to find a job in the US, and they helped me like format my resume and everything, and then I was able to like add my touch because I'm a designer. So applying for design jobs, you need to have like a designy resume, I would say. And at the end, I also was able to like tap into the alumni network. Like they would have me like sought through alumni who are working. Like I wanted to come to New York and work in a design agency, and they helped me find out who are the people in New York or like that I could talk about anything about moving or anything. So it doesn't have to be very job specific either. You can still reach out to from alumni and ask them about other things that you might encounter if you're moving or anything, almost anything. Yeah.
Absolutely. Lots of different resources for people of color to do some job searching. Thank you for all of the pieces of information. Dina, I want to specifically ask you this next question. It's a two-part question. So can you provide some tips, professional, anecdotal tips for how students of color should be preparing their resumes and preparing to interview for upcoming job applications? So if they're asked to submit a resume, they're asked to come in for an interview, what are some things that they can do to prepare? And then also, can you touch a little bit on what is code switching? Sort of help explain that to students and what that means.
Awesome. I think that we put this question at the perfect spot because Joey, I feel like, gave the whole scoop. And I'll definitely be referencing some of the things that he mentioned. But in terms of tips, context is important. How much research you do and what you do before that interview or that resume, or before you send in that application, is super important. So context is important and essential. It is essential to prepare. For your resume, definitely using the resources. That is the number one thing I tell all my high school students. I work with high schoolers, and one of the things that I see is turning in whatever you started out with or just a draft. And I'm like, is that what you want your first impression to be virtually? And now whenever you see them in person, what do you want your first impression to be personally? Now that we're moving more into a virtual world, we're using a lot more Zoom, and maybe you'll have to record yourself for your interview or do some other little things. I think that at the end of the day, it depends on how much of a challenge or how you want to be challenged in a way, or how you want to challenge yourself. I think in the screen we have a little bit of a sort of a bigger company, smaller companies, nonprofits, and I think that every environment is very different and very different in terms of the demands that the business or company or nonprofit will ask you for, or educational system. I know Steve used to be more in PEP, so I know he definitely has a lot more experience on that end. But do your research. Know what the culture is like. Definitely going back to what Joey said in terms of just using your resources, impressions, networking, what John said. Within Furman, I think that we definitely are aware of, sort of your fraternity life, and then your not affiliated students. And I think that it's a fair share to use both. If you're not affiliated, find ways to be affiliated to other things that are important to you. So that would be my other thing. Get to know yourself and what you value and what you want your next few years. And ideally, hopefully, whenever you're looking for your first job, you're not planning to stay there for 3 months. You're planning to stay there maybe for a year, 2, maybe 3. So think of some of the things that you're going to be doing right after undergrad and see how much, how exposed you want to put yourself, or how exposed you want to place yourself, or how much exposure you want to give yourself. In terms of navigation and just getting to know the people inside, I think that one thing that I do, and this is something that I do more for work, is I step into places to see what the experience will be for the other person. I think that gives you a lot about the culture of the company or the entity. I think that gives you a lot of how you feel you're going to be walking in an interview. Are you going to feel super nervous? Are you going to feel, have a sense of what the environment is like and navigate the place. Sometimes you're going to be going into a big building, and if you're 15 minutes late because you got lost in the building, that's not the best first impression, versus going into a small building that the front office is going to lead you right into the interview room. You might need to come in 15 minutes early. You might always plan to, everything happens. Right before this call, I was actually driving, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get there. I'm going to make it happen. And I was prepping everybody around me. I was like, okay, this is what's going to happen for the next hour. And I think having that network definitely helps you bounce ideas, prepare, practice, and truly gives you some of that confidence to believe in yourself. I love what Anish started with. You don't have to put yourself in a different position. And what John referenced to as well, you're at the same level. The number one person that should be cheering itself on is you. So if you are not confident and 100% on that train, find somebody that will get you there. So I have my best friend that for her first interview, she was like, I'm nervous, I'm not gonna get it. I was like, take a step back. You're going in with a negative mindset already. So, place your mind in a good place where you don't feel like you're rushing through answers, or you don't feel like you're rushing through the space and you're like, okay, what's next? Instead, really take a moment to be there and be present. And then with that, going off of, how to prepare for those interviews is use those experiences. Furman places a lot of experiences at your fingertips. And it truly is a matter of you taking a decision or you choosing one thing over the other. Sometimes we go to those CLPs, and when we're college students, we're like, what am I going to use this ever for, right? So, but I clearly remember using some of my CLPs during an interview where they were asking me about advocacy. And I was like, well, let me tell you about SDA. Let me tell you about OLA. Let me tell you about all of these organizations. And then at the end of the day, when I was at Furman, I decided to join a fraternity, not a fraternity, not a guy, a sorority. And that was definitely one experience that I've been able to use over the past 2 years, 3 years that I've been working at the nonprofit that I work in. And then my next thing, kind of going into code switching, is networking. Networking is important. With the organization that I work with, our main purpose and our main job is to network and to truly have a hold of people's information, people's jobs, experiences, what their passions are. And at the end of the day, that helps us provide back to the community and give back. So with networking, you get to know all sorts of people. And I think it's really important to build deep relationships. whenever you're building relationships over time, you never know what experience is going to help you, step up the ladder. You never know what experience is going to help you connect with somebody. So relationship building is really important, and that's definitely been something that has helped me. And with relationship building, find ways to stand out and bring out the experiences that you've lived that have helped shape you. You're very unique in a lot of ways, but I think sometimes we have to get to know ourselves and really say, okay, this is important to me because in my childhood I didn't have this, or this is important to me because this helped my parents raise me and become the person that I am, or it might be something very, very different. But definitely take a look and just think back on some of those experiences that you've had and apply them to the job that you're applying to. So researching and learning about those values and things that are important for the business is very important, and they should have them listed on their website. Just like Joey said, sometimes it's the stock photos, but see if that's actually somebody in the business. So my next thing with code switching is sometimes it's a little uncomfortable, and sometimes people find it very comfortable. I think you have to challenge yourself at times, and code switching in a way is imagine going from Target over to Goodwill and then over to Gucci. You have very different environments, very different things. And I think there's sometimes at the end of the day, we're all human. So we have that in common, right? So I think that code switching is finding those, in my opinion, is finding those commonalities and seeing how those commonalities can be transferred over to new environments. So one thing that I do with some of my students whenever we go over to Furman is I ask them to look around, just sit and look who's around, what are they doing, or sometimes things are very stereotypical. We talk about food sometimes, we talk about just like habits and things, but sometimes it's more deep and it's a little bit more profound that helps you create a relationship, a connection with other people or other cultures. So I would say code switching is really a way in which people find relationships and connections and apply them to different environments, and you apply those to yourself. So sometimes we step into places where we are the only person of color, or we are the only Hispanic, or the only Latinx, or the only Asian, or the only something. And sometimes you're able to navigate that environment very easily. So think of the most comfortable place to be in, right? And now think of the most possibly uncomfortable place to be in. And learning how to navigate that environment is important because you're there for a reason, whether it's a job, whether it's an interview, whether it's to help somebody else, whether it's to win that scholarship, just like John did at some point. So it really is sometimes just taking a step back and not necessarily limiting yourself. Instead, feel comfortable asking the questions. I think that one thing that a lot of our students do or don't do enough is ask questions. One thing that I tell my students is at the end of any interview that you do, make sure you don't leave without asking at least one question. Hey, when am I going to get a call back? Or hey, they can be the most simplest question, or maybe it's a whole list of questions that you already have. It makes you look prepared. And I would definitely use people that are older than you. They're older for a reason. They have a career for a reason, and they have the years of experience for a reason. And the only thing they're trying to do is, kind of extend a hand and say, hey, let me show you how to get to the point where I'm at. And if at some point you run faster than me and you get ahead, let me ask you how you got there, So I think it definitely depends on what level you want to get to, whether it's a national organization that you're trying to be recruited by, or if it's a small nonprofit that is recruiting you. I think at the end of the day, follow up. I think that shows how important you think that position is. So at the end of every interview, I try to send a thank you email, thank you notes, thank you something, because they're taking the time to invest in you. And if they're taking the time to invest in you, show some gratitude. Just a quick, like, I appreciate your time. I look forward to getting a response, and that keeps them in the back of their mind, to have a follow-up with you. So I think that kind of covers a lot of the bases that I was asked about in terms of how to prepare for your resume, for your interview, and then in terms of code switching. That is a very important tool to use. And I've seen some people begin to apply it to their resumes. So some of the skills that you have, what do you have? Language, code switching. You can list off so many, and go to the Malone Center if you can't. But at the end of the day, sometimes you take a look at some of these environments, and the only reason why Steve reached out to some of the people that are on the screen is because maybe to a certain extent, we've kept the connection and we've kept the relationship. And I think I can say that at the beginning, we talked about having a O2, 2018 graduates, and John, I'm so sorry, I forgot yours. But using some of that, I was saying, using some of those things to help you build some of those experiences and really challenge yourself. I think that helps in the long run. And sometimes being nervous is really important. It kind of shows how important some things are. But take down the jitters, take a breather, use something to help you calm down and make sure that you're present. And believe in yourself. I think that's the most important. You got to where you are for a reason. You worked your butt off. Make sure you prove it to them as well. And you prove it to yourself, especially.
Absolutely. Some of the things that Dina hit on are spot on for the interview and for getting your resume prepared for that potential job. Making sure that you're doing your research, making sure that your resume is mistake-free, that someone is sort of looking over your shoulder to help you prepare for things. Be yourself. Stay calm in the interview process. Like, when people are going for interviews, they want to see you. They don't want to see sort of this sort of make-believe person for the actual job, and then you take the job and you're a totally different person. I think that's sort of that balance of what code switching, what Dina was talking about. Like, you have to know your environment. When you're hanging out with your people, you call them your people. You can't necessarily use colloquial terms and things like that when you're on the job or when you're in an interview. So you got to know when to turn it on and when to turn it off. Always got to follow up with people. For example, tonight, you'll get the LinkedIn profiles of all of these individuals. Follow up with them. They can be a great resource of information for you. Got to do the same thing when you're going for interviews and things like that. Got to follow up with people so they remember who you are. Some great tips, Dina. Sort of a perfect segue, I think, into John's question, which is an important question. They're all really important questions, but this one is specifically about the interview, specifically about, as a candidate, you're sitting down, you're having a conversation with someone about a job, you're going through the job search process, and you actually feel like you experience some racism, you experience some bias, whether that is intentional or maybe a little bit of just ignorance on the other person's, end who's conducting the interview or talking to you as a candidate. You're feeling a little uneasy. You're feeling like, I'm thinking maybe I'm being judged. How should or how can a person navigate that situation? What are some things that they can do to make themselves look positive, to not, feel a little bit like they have experienced some sort of bias? What are some tips that advice you would give for people in that kind of situation, students in that situation?
Yes, I don't believe I have firsthand experienced that. I would say if you experience something that is overt, run. That's not a place you want to work at. I'm going to kick it off for you right there. That is not a place where you're going to work at. It is like going on a first date. Sometimes like, this isn't my person. These aren't my people. Keep it moving. I think we have the same responsibility to be just as selective as the employer is. We can be just as selective with the types of companies that we want to work for. If you do experience that in that setting, I always think if you have the words, because I think sometimes I struggle with getting the words when I need to per se check someone or educate someone about how they have I've experienced a microaggression, like, And so you're probably wondering, how do you know it's a microaggression? It's a microaggression when you walk away from the situation and you keep replaying it in your head. Like, wait, what did they mean by that? That is confirmation that it was a microaggression. For example, I'll give a real life example. One day, a couple of years ago, I was at my job. I don't wear suits all the time. We're a more casual work environment, but on game days, people wear suits. So I had on my suit, and one of my colleagues made a comment. Now, he's a friend. I think he meant it casually, but it sat with me. And he said, "Oh, John, you got on your suit today. You must have court." So at first I was like, no, I was like, no, I got a big meeting today or something. But it set with me. And I was like, what did he mean by that? And so I never circled back. I feel like too much time had passed. But if you can find the words in the moment, the best way to address a microaggression is to say, hey, I'm not sure of your intent by what you said, but your impact made me feel A, B, C. And then you sit there and you be quiet because it's their time to respond for this moment that they have created. So that takes skill, that takes experience. One thing I would say, you may not be in the best position to articulate that in your first job interview, but my wish and my hope is that you don't experience that overtly in an interview. Know that bias is everywhere. I touched on that prior to this portion of the program. Bias is everywhere. We have it, everyone has it. But I don't think you need to let that define who you are. There's a saying that I know in my community, in my culture, it's you got to work twice as hard. How many people have heard you have to work twice as hard? Can you put that in those in the chat? Can you just say yes if you've heard that? Because I don't know who's out there. It sounds like there's mystery people. I'm trying to get a sense of who's there. If you could just put in the chat, okay, perfect. Annie said, yes, you've heard that. I want to change that narrative. I want us to start thinking about, I want to continue to work hard. I want to continue to have the best work ethic and hustle, but I also want to have the foresight to recognize when I have outgrown a space. So, for example, there's a house. The employer that you want to work for is the house. It is a 3-foot house, but all of us, people of color, women, we're 5 feet. So I can crouch down and get in that house in the beginning because I'm excited. There's just new opportunity, so I'm crouching down. Then after a while, I'm like, Steve, my back's starting to hurt. This is getting uncomfortable. And so then I start to kind of want to stand up, and everyone's like, no, get back down. This is a 3-foot house only. So after a while, it becomes literally uncomfortable to minimize or to code switch to an extreme degree for an environment that is not intended for you. So sometimes that twice as hard mentality is, I'm just going to keep working hard, head down, you apply for a promotion, guess what? You get skipped over. Then you say, okay, well, the next one, no. There is no second tries for me. I'm typically, if I've gone through the process, and maybe that's my own ego, I want to learn from that moment, but I don't like rejection. I don't think anyone likes rejection. And if I don't feel that the opportunity, if I was passed with opportunity for a valid reason, then that lets you know where you stand with that organization. I think sometimes we internalize too much versus recognizing, guess what? There are plenty of other opportunities out here that I can pursue. There's another company. I can go to ScanSource and talk to Joey. He's a Furman alum. Based on my skill set, they have this new opportunity that will be a stretch position for me. I want you to always grow every move. Don't go to, you can make lateral moves or parallel moves, but try to step it up, stretch yourself, expand your skill set. So I say all that to say, sometimes you need to leave that house. That house is not for you. And so if you're 3 foot and you're 5 foot, after a while, I can crouch down for a while, but after a while that hurts. My knees hurt, my back hurts, and then it becomes uncomfortable, and we internalize that. That turns into stress, that turns into anxiety, that turns into, I really dread getting up every day going to this job. One thing that my wife helped me in my first job is that I became complacent. When people ask me what was my biggest sort of career failure or opportunity, was becoming complacent. I was comfortable there. I didn't like the work environment, but I had a steady income. I knew the place, but I would come home every day unhappy. And so your happiness is key. So my wife was like, well, why don't you just apply for another job? And I was delaying and dragging my feet. Then finally one day she was like, well, just send me your resume. My resume, which I still have, was crafted in the student center. And that's still the same format. I need to update my format, but it is effective format. I think there was someone, Miss Sawyer there. I can't remember. I need to talk to Steve to see if that name is correct. But I say all that to say, it's okay to leave a job. People do it all the time. You have the most power on the front end of a job. There are plenty of Forbes articles that talk about, you make more money over your career by not jumping jobs every day and every week and every year, but making sure you keep a pulse on the market. So I would say cast a wide net. If you experience bias in the interview, run. That's not the place for you. If you can find the words to address it and make it a learning moment, do that. But if you can't, everyone in this group, we've been in those situations before. So you know how to navigate them. You have experience in how to, you know, exit the stage. But then also you can also follow up. If they were to extend an offer to you, you can decline it. And then you can tell them, shed some insight into why you declined it. That is a profound statement. You can put it in writing. You can let the recruiting manager know. You could even send it up to the HR person. It's like, hey, I was really excited about the opportunity to join XYZ company. However, and I'm very appreciative of the job offer, but I must be fully transparent here and tell you what I experienced or how the interview process made me feel. No one can take away from how they made you feel. Intent versus impact are totally different things. And so someone will say, I'm sorry, that wasn't my intent. That's great, but your impact was this. So I think providing the feedback is key, but I know that takes time. That takes a spirit of discernment, knowing when to step into that space, when not to. I think, you know, when I was coming out of school, everyone's like, use your voice in the room. You know, you hear all these people that are in the C-suite, like, you must use your voice. And I was like, well, that's kind of hard. Like, I'm the lowest man on the totem pole in this room. No one at my level is talking. That takes time and skill. So don't expect that you're going to come out and you're going to walk into the CEO's office and you're going to command A, B, and C. Read the room. Read the room is a great way to understand or organization's culture. So I would say all of that, but don't, you know, continue to work hard. I don't want you to forget that, but know that sometimes you just have to go because you've outgrown that space. Your skills and your abilities are beyond what they're able to see for yourself. And I also believe that we as individuals are responsible for our professional development. You will fail yourself if you don't speak up for yourself. Closed mouths do not get fed. I promise you. Joey's in recruiting. I work in HR. Everyone here works in the career services aspect. Your boss isn't going home at night saying, you know what? Dino wants a promotion. It's been, I can't sleep at night because I know Dino wants his promotion. You may get a boss that's great like that. But 9 times out of 10, they're just focused on what's coming the next day, the next week. You have to make sure that you speak that into existence. And I'll share a personal story. So I graduated in 2009. The economy was bad. I was a poli-sci major at Furman. He was like, you know, what are you doing after graduation? After a while, I was just like, I'm moving to DC. That was just the best thing I could come up with. I did an internship in DC and it was a great experience. And the person that I did an internship with the Washington Center said, hey, when you graduate, hit us up. You did such a good job. We will definitely want to hire you. So I managed this relationship for 2 years because I did the internship as a sophomore, graduated. Oh, we went with another candidate that had more experience. I kept hearing that left and right. But I had already moved to DC, unemployed. So I knew that I had to make something work. Got here, first job, guess what? I was working at DSW Shoes, part-time. Furman degree, and I'm sure you guys know how much those Furman degrees are. I'm working at DSW Shoes. So I was there for a little over a month. Another Furman alum, because a lot of poli-sci majors come to DC, worked at a restaurant as the waiter. So I reached out to her and she was like, I'm making great tips. I would tell anyone, if you need in-between income or flexible job, wait tables. So I started waiting tables there. You know why the general manager hired me? He said, oh, you went to school with her? Her name was Rachel. He's like, you're hired. I didn't even have to interview. He's like, you went to Furman? Hired. Power of networking there. She had gone in and knocked down a door for Furman alum, and I just walked in it, and I didn't let him down either. We were both like the best waiters in the whole restaurant. But it's all about humbling yourself to a degree in that process. Because I could have had an ego and said, I have this degree. I'm not waiting tables. I think the best thing I got out of waiting tables was perfecting my networking skill. Because I would walk up to a table, and there's 3 types of tables you're going to get. Some that want to engage with you, some that just want you to serve them, and some that are like, I'm in a hurry, let's get out of here. So you got to come up to that table and you got to kind of read that room. I'm a talker, so if you want to engage with me, let's go. I'm going to keep bringing shots. We're going to have a good time. If you have kids, I understand Steve has 2 kids, or 3 kids now, right? So when you have kids, you know the parents are like, look, we want to put the kids in order now. When you come back with all of that, we'll have our order and we bring the check. Matter of fact, before the food gets here, bring the check because they're trying to get in and out. That's great because guess what? I want to turn this table over. So not to go down that rabbit hole, but I moved to DC as a poli-sci major and still was not working in that field. I had opportunities to do internships on Capitol Hill. I turned that down because guess what? They wanted me to work for free. I couldn't do an unpaid internship. So through the power of networking and a bunch of no's, there was someone that worked in my apartment building that said I work at Hyatt Hotels. And so I'm thinking, poli-sci degree, Hyatt Hotels, I don't want to clean rooms. That's where my mind went for like hospitality. And so then a month later, he's like, hey, you still looking? I was like, matter of fact, I am. So tell me about Hyatt again. And they had a convention service position, which was setting up tables and chairs. It was overnight. So I was like, well, great, I'll apply for that. Got an interview because he's like, I can at least get your interview. They have a strong referral program. I went in for the interview, and then guess what they said? You're overqualified. And they were right. They knew that, me as an individual with a 4-year degree, I was not going to stay here in this role for any amount of time. And I knew that. I knew that as soon as I got the next full-time opportunity, I was leaving. So from a company, there is a cost associated with onboarding me. And then if I leave before they sort of get the return on that investment, then that was a bad hire for them. So with that, in that interview, in my preparation, so Dina talked about how do you prepare for interviews, and Joey and Anish, I saw they had an HR coordinator job. So in the interview, I said, well, hey, I actually applied for the HR coordinator job last night as I was preparing. And then bells and whistles went off, and they're like, oh my God, you'd be interested? I was like, sure would. So they were like, do you have time to stick around? So I hung around, and from there, I got the job a week later. So that was how I got my first job. There was many opportunities of failure, many no's, but I think what I would say, all in all, believe in yourself, have confidence, and now I'll stop so you can get some of your questions in.
I wanted to add something before the question. Sorry, I know we're almost in time, but I think that doing research and networking is like so important because when I came to the US, like I had to learn everything from scratch, like from filing taxes to how to, get someone number. Like I had to learn everything from scratch. And I think knowing some terms like what is an equal employer, your resume should be ATS optimized, like doing like a general research of your salary. So like you're not taken off guard when you're talking about this in the interview, I think is really important. And when someone is calling you in for an interview, they want you as much as you want them. Always remember that. And during the interview, it's not only about them trying to learn about you, it's an opportunity for you to learn about them too. Like John said, like if during the interview something makes you uncomfortable, it's not the right place, and you should leave. Glassdoor is a good resource where you can look up like reviews and stuff. I mean, don't trust everything, but still it's a good starting point, I think, to get an idea of how the company is like. And like I had applied for 322 jobs. Wow. After graduating, and I got one job, and that was because of networking and because of I was prepared. My friend had moved to New York, and she's a former alumni. She was working, and then she texted me, hey, I saw you posting on LinkedIn. Are you still looking for a job? Do you want to apply? And she said yes. I said yes, and I had my resume and the cover letter ready on my Google Drive, and I remember standing in the parking lot of a Walmart and sending her that right from my phone. And 2 days later, I had an interview at Penguin Random House in New York City. So right out of school, I was working at the top publishing company, and that put me in a projectile which like helped me get where I am right now. And never like be ashamed of networking, like people always think like, oh, I got it because I had a connection there, but that is how it is. Like you are only going to watch a movie if your friend likes the movie. You are not going to just watch a movie because it came out, because the company is also spending money when they're hiring you, right? So it's an investment for them. So they definitely look to the employee to tell them, oh, this is a great person, they have the skill, and hire them. So definitely do that. Okay, sorry, I took so much time.
That was great.
Yeah.
No, great piece of information. For the audience that's out there, this is why, I wanted these individuals to participate in this conversation. We have a lot of personal experience, research, all of navigating this space as a person of color. And so, this is your opportunity now. If you have questions for the panel, please go ahead and type them in the chat. I can also unmute your microphone if you want to ask your question. personally out loud, please go ahead and this is your chance to ask these Furman alums, these great Furman alums, if you have any questions. Here's one from John Barker. Are there things you believe Furman should be doing to help students of color better prepare for a successful transition to the world of work? It's a great question. John.
I think more opportunities like this. I'm oftentimes surprised how I'm not being, and maybe that's my own fault, but how I'm not I don't know if I'm in the right network of like getting in contact with students or students being able to get in contact with me. If you reach out to me on LinkedIn, first, you need to personalize your invite and say, if you just say, I'll go to Furman, I went to Furman, I'm going to accept it and I want to talk to you. So leverage that power. I know we have a Black Furman alumni group on LinkedIn. All are welcome to join that group. But so if you you want to get into that group, you can message me. But I think more opportunities like this is what Furman should do in putting people in contact so they can tell their real world experiences and how they leveraged Furman.
Mm-hmm. Now that I have access to you, you definitely will be a part of these kinds of conversations more often. All of you definitely will. I promise not to overburden you. So anybody else? Would anybody else like to elaborate? Yes, Dina.
One thing that I know Furman does really well is support the initiatives that the students themselves suggest, bring from other schools, bring from other places. So I think that if Furman is not already doing it and you have an idea, go talk to somebody about it and make it happen. I think that's the one thing that I loved about Furman. If there was something that I was thinking about and I was like, this is my idea, but I have no idea if we can make it happen, there was always somebody willing to help me push the whatever it was and make it happen, or find out who already had that idea, or just find out. And that kind of goes back into networking. So if you have something, go for it. And I want to tie in one more thing with that. And it kind of goes back to John's last question in terms of the bias and whatnot. But if you know, to a certain extent, whenever you're interviewing, and I know that this is more for interviews and jobs, that you're interviewing and that you are already feeling uncomfortable, maybe that's a sign, or in some way, that at some point you should become your own boss and become an entrepreneur. I think that you have the power, and I think everybody has their own experiences, but I think you have the power to change the work environment in itself. So on that end, if anybody wants to connect with me in terms of becoming an entrepreneur, I picked up a business right in the middle of me having a job, and a full-time job, and it was not slowing down. I did not pick up a business because it was slowing down. Instead, it's because I wanted to challenge myself a little bit more and give that opportunity to other people. So I just wanted to throw that one out there. We can always get recruited, but you can also, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of prepping, it takes a lot of everything. But if you have it, go for it. So I think it kind of goes for both in terms of opportunities and creating those opportunities for yourself. Be a trailblazer.
Quick thing about networking is that I think you're graduating and going into the real world, this pivot point is the best part to network because you always have to find a common ground to network. Like if we met at the event last night, or we go to the same, I don't know, like class, like pottery class, anything. But now you can really connect with like CEOs of companies straight up, because the Malone Center can be the middleman, like trying to connect you guys. So definitely leverage that. I cannot stress enough how important networking is. And people on LinkedIn also know why you're networking with them. Like it's not a mystery. Like they are not clueless. They are on LinkedIn because they want to network and help each other. And in this way, you can not only get a job, but you can get a lifelong mentor too. So keep that in mind. And you don't have to ask them, do you want to be my mentor? You could just keep asking them questions, and they will keep answering. It's a very sneaky way, but I have like 5 mentors. They don't even know that they're my mentors, but they have helped me throughout my career. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yes, definitely. Mentors is amazing. And you know, one of the things that we can provide at Furman through Melanie Armstrong, she oversees the connections between Furman students and Furman alums, and even friends of Furman. If you're looking for a mentor, we can help facilitate that matching for you. So definitely utilize Furman for that resource. Anything else anybody would like to add? Joey, or go ahead, Joey.
Yeah. Oh, so I was just going to say, so the question was like, are there things that you believe Furman can do? And John mentioned this earlier in the very beginning that look, Furman's going to prepare you in ways that you probably don't even know. I mean, in navigating the white space, right? So you're going to get that from your overall experience. But there's also something to be said too that while we can always rely on the background of what Furman gives, there's also that element of what you have to do internally, right? What you have to do, you have to put in the work too. The Career Services Center isn't going to come just to you. You have to go to them. So I think as much as there are things that Furman can do, like setting this up today or, doing a career fair or things like that, yeah, that's what the school is going to do. But there's also that element that you have to internally go out and seek those opportunities, right? Like to John's point, a closed mouth isn't going to get fed. Like you have to go out there and find those opportunities to network and find those opportunities to build relationships, because that's what's going to help you get where you need to go next. It's not just necessarily going to be there. So yeah, Furman is going to be there and provide you with some great resources. But oftentimes I've learned, and I learned that the hard way, is that you have to actively go out to them. They're not going to come to you.
Yeah,
I also feel like the Furman bubble is small, so it's easy to get things done quickly and connect with people quickly. But at the same time, it's don't get into the sub bubble, like I call them, like a fraternity or a sorority. Talk to people outside that. Only then you'll figure out and you'll learn more about culture and everything. So definitely do that.
Yeah, absolutely. These are great pieces of advice related to that question of how Furman can prepare students better for transitioning to the real world. Other questions from the audience? Maybe we have time for one more question if there's one. We're on forward silence.
I have one quick thing. And I think I learned about this.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
I think I learned
please.
about that the Malone Center is not there for you just for 4 years. It's there for you as an alumni as well. So even though you're there for 4 years, maybe you take advantage of it, maybe you don't. But even after graduation, I think that's kind of part of your networking. That's a resource that you have available. So whenever you feel like you're needing their help, reach out. Kind of going back to don't be scared to ask questions.
Mm-hmm. You were, as a Furman student, you are always a part of the Furman family. I mean, if let's say for some reason you had a little bit of a difficult time at Furman, and after you graduated, you just said, you know what, I need to take a break from the Paladin world, and I need to just go out and do my own thing for a while. I need to build up some networks outside of Furman. Maybe I need to do a little bit more investigation, self-internalization on what's important to me, and realize some different worlds outside of that bubble, like Anish said. That's great, and Furman will always encourage you to do that. But if you ever need help, if you ever need assistance, if you ever want to return back to Furman and network and connect with people, Furman's always going to be there for you. So always remember that, and make sure you tell your friends the same thing. Tell other alums, Furman is here for you to use as a resource. We have lots of amazing opportunities for students to reconnect and stay connected with the institution. So
Steve,
we're actually go there.
Steve, sorry, before you end, I have a quick thing on that note, is that like alumni should come back. Like I took a break from the Paladin world too, because there were There are things, of course, that are not very perfect, and we need to keep improving everywhere. But if you come back and give back to the community, you can improve the Furman experience for existing and incoming students, and in a way, you can uplift the name of Furman. So in the future, you will be more proud of being, say, like, I'm a Paladin. So always remember that, like, all these institutions which has been there for like centuries, they didn't start off being perfect or having the image that they have right now. And same goes to Furman. So definitely give back. Come back in a few years after you graduate and give back to the community.
Janice, for that reminder. We're out of time, and I do want to respect everyone's responsibilities to family and to prepare for the next workday. And so what I want to do is thank all of our panelists, Dina, Anish, John, and Joey. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for participating in this webinar. A round of applause goes to you for the excellent information that you shared and the time that you spent with us this evening on this webinar. So thank you very, very, very much. To the participants that are on this webinar, I will make sure to share with you each one of the individuals or each one of these alums LinkedIn profile, so that way you can connect with them. As Anissa mentioned, we know what LinkedIn is for. So if you reach out, you're wanting to connect, and each one of them can be a great resource of information for you. And then also we're recording this session as a reminder, so we'll definitely make this recording available as well. I do want to just do a quick reminder. This is part one of a conversation about first careers for students of color. The next conversation that we're going to have is directly about race, ethnicity, and workplace culture. That conversation is going to happen on October the 28th, and so we hope that you'll be able to join us for that. You can find more about that particular webinar on Handshake or on the Malone Center webpage. So again, thank you to all of our panelists. I appreciate you spending time. Again, my name is Steve Harrison. If you have any questions, concerns, or want to reach out to Malone Center, feel free to visit our website or email me directly. Thank you, panelists, for a great conversation this evening. And thank you all for participating in our webinar tonight. So I'll leave you with that. I hope you all have a great evening. And we look forward to seeing you later.